this is...
What he was and wasn't. 6 or so ways of looking at Clark. 1. What he was not. Clark was not your great romance, loved and lost. He was not your one-shot at happiness in a cold and lonely world. He was not in the least a perfect slave, or even a good slave, dedicated to his mistress's happiness. Clark was not, certainly not, some cruel Machiavellian seducer, a cynical Lothario, to play with your heart, tease your affections, and then smash you to pieces, as payback for some slight suffered, some insult committed against him by womankind in his golden-haired youth. And at the knotty heart of Clark's vast notness, Clark was not, and even more, Clark is not your once and future king, your lover man in exile, your treasure cast aside to be valued that much more after you've had to struggle to win him back. Oh no, he is not. Oh yes, we know what Clark was not. 2. What Clark was. The problem is that we also know what Clark was. He was your first sub. He was your original slave boy. He was a haunted and obsessed suitor who stalked you down, charged into your world, wouldn't take no for an answer, risked everything again and again to be with you and to serve you. He was the first man to prove with his nerve, with his body, with his flesh, with his cock, with his cash, with his asshole, with his brashness, with his need, and with his whining insistence that you are the sexual power you'd always suspected you were, and maybe feared you weren't. He was the first unequivocal piece of evidence that yes, you are what you believe you are. He was your first proof. He was the first man to lay his cards on the table and call every bet that the dealer slapped down. You'd been a dominant goddess for decades in your imagination, for years while masturbating alone, for months on the phone lines, on video chats. You'd claimed to be a sextrovert, but wondered if maybe you were still ruled by mind-forged manacles and by bestial Catholic guilt. Maybe not a sextrovert, but maybe merely a syntrovert? Clark was the first guy to ante up, to bet on you in your first high-stake tournament. So, dreaming Dom, will you slap a man and get a thrill? Clark held open the door for you. You went through, and the answer was yes, yes, mistress. So, art school succubus, will you put a mask over a man's face, have him stretch out, naked and vulnerable before you, stiff and immobile, as you stroke his cock to rock hardness? Then squeeze that cock till he squeaks. Then place that cock in your mouth to tease it with your tongue. And then bitch slap that stiff cock twice, whap whap. And tell him to take himself in his hand and make himself come. Will you do that on your own clean sheets? Clark groaned on those sheets and gasped, yes, yes, Mistress God, yes, and answered for the two of you. So, phone line bitch goddess, will you strap on a cock and fuck a man in a strange mix of pleasure and punishment? Will you go that far? Will you pound your dick over and over, over and under and through and into his lubed up asshole as he begs and pleads and groans and begs? Clark held open the door and you plunged in. And the answer was, yes, goddess, please. The universe asked, will you leave your comfortable life, your safe home and bright studio imprinted with the very shape of your spirit? Will you abandon all that to be true to this new wild energy? Clark bust that door open, you strode through. The dark gods wondered, would you bend two men to your will? Lead them by their cocks, by their desire and their fear, and by your strength and your dark sexuality? Would you have them surrender together in your bed? To fuck you and love you together in your bed? To worship you and dedicate themselves as a team like oxen yoked at a plow, or two captive lions drawing the empress's chariot through the arena, together in your bed. The dark gods noted that to control a man's flesh is no small thing. To command his selfish and unruly cock is an even greater thing. But to bind his will? To bend his spirit to yours? The dark gods wondered, could you? Would you? Clark held open the door to your bedroom, and you strode through, both men in tow. And you were majestic and beautiful and powerful and loved, and for that moment at least, you were safe in a sensual heaven of your own creating. You were casting a spell to transform yourself into the strong sexual domina of your dreams. And the casting cost was flesh. Clark stalked you down, showered you with offerings, and provided that casting cost. He was the flesh that made your dreams real. That's what Clark was. But then he left, and once he left, he could no longer be those things. So, what is he now? 3. What Clark is now. Right now, Clark is a thing in your life. Gone from your life. He's still a thing in your life that he shouldn't be. He's that thing that betrayed. He's a symbol of your too trusting nature, your babe in the woods naivete. He's proof of your underlying vulnerability, of the slippery hold you have perched above some yawning abyss of depression. He's the living proof that you're a weak bullshit dom whose slaves will slip their chains of love, will blow their hot hearts cool, and leave you in the night to wander your empty, cold dungeon alone. He's the voice that whispers that you are fooling yourself, and nobody can change, that you'll never be more than the person that life pounded you into. The nose to the grindstone, hell or high water, always reliable, force of stability in everyone's life. Selling your spirit and vision to keep the lights on. The worker thing, homebody you'd become in a bargain to survive for so many years. And somehow, it felt like now, Clark got to decide that maybe that worker thing was all you were and all you'd ever be. Right now, when you're tired, when you're lonely, when you're horny, when you're sad, Clark is the sorrow that won't leave, the anger that won't fade, the darkness that casts its shadow over every fond memory of the two of you together, every false promise he'd made, every possible future path. Right now, perhaps Clark is all that pain, I'm guessing. Guessing from things you've told me, but guessing all the same. Still, I know this. That what Clark has become in your life is what someone becomes in a life when they've betrayed you, when they've rejected you, when they've turned from your love. And because Clark fled from your love, because Clark is hiding from your love, right now, Clark has to be that sorrow in your love. He has to be that fear, that anger, that seed of doubt. But not forever, not for good, not, truth be told, for much longer. Not much longer, not this Clark, not this you. You're too strong. Too much a pale and dark storm cloud of sex and lightning and beauty. And he's too Clark. And while each gray morning he shivers in some suburban dream home, sipping his vanilla latte and growing fatter and duller, your only challenge is to decide what he really was in your life. Yes, he'd been your first sub, the flesh offering that made the spell work, but he threw that away. Yes, he's a thing that betrayed and battered your heart, but you'll eventually forget him. You'll eventually remember him only as a story you'll tell about him. Clark will be forgotten, so you might as well start now. So again, really, what is Clark? 4. 5 ways of looking at Clark. Clark was a battering ram to splinter and burst the gates of kindness and compromise and fear that was a prison castle kingdom of your life. You needed a blunt tool to pound and burst and come pouring in like sweating armor-chafed knights on foaming, exhausted war nags, or screaming Vikings slathered over with bear fat. You needed his brashness, his overconfidence, his completely lacking in evidence belief that he would have his way with you. Clark was your battering ram when you needed one. But once the gates are down, there's not much more use to be had from a battering ram, which is basically little more than a heavy knob on a clumsy stick. And maybe it's time for a new tool. Clark was your cowpox, a minor infection to expose oneself to that left you sick and shivering and weak, but that will harden your body to the infections out there and allow you to build up immunities. Desire is a fever. Love is a sickness that can feel like dying. And to open yourself to another is just as dangerous as it sounds. For years you had been a girl in a bubble. No risk, no germs, no fevers, no danger, no aching skin or bones. You needed to toughen up. You needed a minor infection. You needed to get sick in order to get strong. To learn what sickness is in order to give your spirit and heart time to alchemize immunities. You needed to learn that a little fever will burn itself out, will clear out an infection. And an after fever ache won't kill you. You're stronger than that. In the dark fields of love's conquest, it's not enough to be strong. You need to be tough. Getting sick from Carl was the ass-kicking your heart needed for that toughness to grow. Or, Clark was the ugly mud of reality to splatter all over your beautiful silken gown of fantasy. You are an artist and a libertine. You create beauty, you impose order on chaos. You see a world of wonders and possibilities, and the world is a world of wonders and possibilities. But it's also a world of smallness and meanness and scared little souls. You are an artist and a romantic, a creator and a sensualist. You transform the world in your art, and that makes the world richer with a little more added to the sum total of beauty, and that makes the world richer with souls a little more able to see beauty where they hadn't suspected it before. You are an artist and a slut and a wanton and a visionary. But the world remains the world, and you needed one strong, ugly reminder of that to discipline your wild artist's eye. So what was Clark? A battering ram necessary for a rough task, but not so useful for more exacting work. A cowpox, a minor illness contracted early on, to build up your antibodies, wake up your immune system, force you to get tough to show that sickness doesn't kill. The poison frog in the enchanted garden, the reminder that your imagination is sometimes neither a mirror nor a lamp, but soft lighting in a singles bar or a Facebook filter. A little too good at making something bad look better than it really is. Yeah, probably that was Clark. But if you ask me, this was Clark. Clark was usually scared and tragically overconfident. Clark was overconfidence personified. He believed he would sweep you off your feet. He believed his imperial will could colonize a nation of you. He believed that he had the chops to take you down to size and break you and remake you into that tame leather slut plaything of his fantasies. He believed he was wilder and more twisted and braver than he was. Clark had, I'm sure, his attractions. He was confident. He was bold. He wasn't afraid of reaching out. He was open-handed with all those near-maxed-out credit cards. But like every fool in every tragic story, he believed he was so much more than he was. He thought he would rule you with love. He valued his job and his money above your art and your spirit. Limited in his ability to love, Clark was blindsided by your loyalty to the man you told him you loved, the man you'd carefully explained you would never betray. Clark was a lover who had no idea of the power of love. Clark made promises he couldn't keep. Clark pretended to kindnesses he didn't have. Clark swore vows he secretly knew he would break. Clark invited you down paths that in the end he was afraid to walk. 5. A fallen comrade, a corpse on the hero's path, cut down on his sprint back to safety. Madeline, you have chosen to be the hero of your life. Every hero's path is a hard one. Every hero's path is strewn with the corpses and skeletons of those who stepped onto the path before them. Either they were believing they were true heroes, believing they were so much more than they were. Madeline, you will be the hero of your own life. Clark is a casualty of the path. A broken skeleton in rusted armor, a bag of gold clutched in his skinless hand, dusty coins spilling out backwards in a staggered arc toward the gray home left behind. Clark was desperately racing towards that safety the minute he realized he was no hero. Step over him. Step around him. Recognize him for what he is, a casualty of the path. A one-time traveling companion, but no hero. Just a little man who wanted an adventure and suddenly realized how little adventure he had in him. Step over him. Step around him. Don't waste a tear, but maybe thank him. It's good at the outset of a hero's journey to be reminded that not every man who wants an adventure is a hero, and not every companion of the road, or even companion of your bed, can be trusted. Thank him silently for that lesson, and continue on his path. He broke down a gate, that was helpful. He paid the casting price on a spell to set you free. You appreciated that, and as you should. And then, mere days into the journey, at the first dark turning, he turned and sprinted for home. Though everyone knows, or should know, that all heroes' paths are choked with dark turnings, and that retreat on the hero's path never ends well. A battering ram, a hunk of flesh, offered to aid your spell of transformation, a non-fatal disease, a non-hero companion for those first few days on the hero's path, and the first casualty of lost nerve and retreat. What was Clark? He was a tiny part of the very start of your hero's story. Years from now, he'll merit a sentence or two in the epic tale of your erotic and romantic adventures, the traveler's tale of your vast spiritual pilgrimage. Clark was helpful, and then he got scared. Clark thought he was more than he was. Clark wanted adventure, but he wasn't a hero. He was Clark.